Hello, Dave. How are you? The sun is shining. It's a lovely day today, and this is the start of today's learning experience. Should we call the Mike Beaumont webinar afternoon? Mr. McNary's here. God, what time is it, Mike? 3 o'clock. It must be early morning for you. Alison's arrived in the building. Who's on today? Mike Jacobs now, and then Dr. Scott Lynn tonight. Mr. McNary. Look at all these people arriving that I have no idea who they are. Here's Jim. How are you, Jim? Mike Jacobs is around. I'm just trying to get him on. He's joined. So hopefully in 1 second, with modern science, here he is. I'm all right, thank you, mate. You're on.
How are you?
You're on at 45 degrees at the moment.
Okay.
That's perfect. That is perfect.
Can you hear me okay?
Yeah, that's awesome. Mike. Thanks for coming on. I appreciate you coming on, having a little chat.
Sure.
I thought it was interesting because I've seen so much about you. I remember obviously the first book and things. And
right.
the research that Stephen Nesbitt did years ago,
sure.
And I thought it'd be really interesting to talk to you about the new book and
sure.
and how you feel the what you've discovered has changed viewpoints in terms of what actually is more important to you now and how's it work.
Sure. Yeah, I'll take you through the whole thing. Thanks for having me. My first time doing Instagram Live. I didn't even know what I had to do. I didn't even know I had to do it on my phone. I was looking on my computer.
Yeah, it's great.
Okay. So, I'm good with the Facebook and stuff, and Instagram, those stories. So anyway, so Dr. Nesbitt and I went with a group of pros, and we started learning from Dr. Nesbitt in 2010. So it's 10 years ago. And then shortly after that, I went on my own, and he and I became partners, and we formed our own research company in 2014. So for the past 6 years, we've worked pretty hard at trying to take what's unique about Dr. Nesbitt is from 1988 to the late 1990s, he worked for the USGA and the National Golf Foundation. So he had all kinds of grants from them. So he did golf research pretty in depth. So he had a head start on putting the whole thing together. So we spent a few years developing a program for myself to use as a teacher. And that program was just about the golf club itself. I'm just going to turn my phone off here. So just about the club itself. So what I mean by that is what we describe in Elements of the Swing and Science of the Swing, and in some of the papers that Dr. Nesbitt wrote, is purely the experience of the club. So, the golfer's torquing it and forcing it, but in that context, we're not saying the force is coming from a shoulder or an arm, or it's just purely how the club is being loaded by the golfer. So that's fully explainable by regular Newton's laws. So golf club has a mass center. We treat it as a rigid body, and that's not that difficult for Dr. Nesbitt to do. It is much simpler to do in 2D, to kind of fit it to a plane and just look at how the mass center moves. The three-dimensionality of it makes it difficult, but they spent a lot of time at that at the USGA and the National Golf Foundation. So the experience of the golf club has been a huge benefit to the whole entire golf industry, to know that you know, how much a golfer pushes or pulls on a club or how much a golfer torques a club. Gives us an idea of, you know, what the influence the golfer has to the club. So, for example, if I was telling you, Mike, that down at the bottom of the swing, you're effectively pulling up on 400 range balls, right? Say so let's say the magnitude of force is 400 newtons, right? So it's basically like 400 range balls in a bucket. That's pretty. You would probably in your mind know, okay, I need to position my body in a certain way if I was going to pull up on 400 range balls. Yeah. So it's pretty common that in this area of the swing, the golfer starts to push down on the club to let it move out by pushing about 50 range balls. So it's by putting it in those types of contexts that's helped myself and, you know, everybody else who studied the program. So we completed that, and it's the same stuff that's in the Dr. Nesbitt papers. Dr. Nesbitt went a little further in the past with shaft deflection and stuff. So we've added, so what you have to do there is you have the experience of the club as a rigid body, and then what you have to do is you have to add in a deflection mechanism to build a model for that. So we do that too. What's interesting about that, I'll share one little tidbit about that, is at the top of the swing, the club takes one of its largest bending modes in toe up. So toe up, you know, that bending mode you see at the top. So when you see that bending mode, what you have to understand is the shape of the club changes, and it makes it a little harder to gamma torque it, to twist it this way, because it's deflecting. So that's probably why just about all golfers in that area, good players in that area, wait for that torque to start to ramp up after that deflection starts to come back. So we found commonalities in that kind of stuff. And then we finished that, and then it was up to me to put it into a golf wrapper, and Dr. Nesbitt left that to me and one of his, couple of his students, and then he just oversaw that project. And then in 2017, we sat down and we had a long conversation if we were going to tackle the entire body. So he had done a little bit with body stuff in the Work and Power paper, if you've ever seen that, where So of course I'm a little crazy, like all of us. We love golf, right? I asked him to do a full-blown version. Okay, so he agreed to do it. And for the past 3 years, he's worked on it pretty much nonstop. And we have a full body. It's, you know, we're still putting pieces of it together and all that. So I don't know if you've seen some of the graphics. We could tell you, you know, is the golfer using more of their right arm or left arm or right side of the body, and where the big power source is or where the big power leak is. So the next couple of years are going to be interesting. And, you know, I love the discovery part of it. So that's pretty much what we do.
And you know, when you look at this, do you see many similarities between players or not?
Yes.
You do?
Absolutely. Absolutely. So one of the things that's interesting, I mean, when you think about it, you go buy a set of golf clubs at the store. You just walk in, you're going to buy a set of clubs at the store. They're not all that different. I mean, you might have a senior flex shaft, or you might have a stiff shaft. You might have a ladies club. But they're not very different lengthwise, not very different in stiffness. So there is like an inherent way a human could swing a golf club. And there are also differences. But the most interesting thing is that a player can have just as much hand speed as somebody who swings 30 miles an hour more in the club head. So it's all about how it gets out to the club and the consistency of that. And, you know, when I look at modern things, and, you know, I spend a lot of time doing this, but I try to keep up on everything. And when I look at modern things, I'm the one thing that I always think that people should put it in context when I see instruction and research being done. I think what you have to do is you have to decide, are we doing this for speed and distance? Are we doing this for consistency and accuracy? And there has to be that Goldilocks area in between. I can't say that I'm looking at Alpha Man program just purely from a distance standpoint, yet that's what a lot of golf research does. So I'm looking for it to be something that somebody can do day after day, mostly. So
And
That sums
you
it
know,
up.
at the end of the day, there has to be a combination, doesn't there? Because in order to play the game, you've got to control the ball.
Yes.
So if you go for full out power, right, in
Mm-hmm.
trying to get as much speed as you can in the system, you could actually lose accuracy and as a result not be able to play as well.
Yeah, but I've seen. I mean, I don't follow the statistics that much. You can only load your brain with so much stuff, you know. But it seems like to me a lot of the statistical things I hear when I go to seminars is just hit it as far as you can, and it doesn't matter if it's a little right or a little left. So that's interesting to me. But even tour players I work with, I'm looking for them. Okay, if I'm going to help them make a couple of adjustments in their swing or whatever they're doing in their game, I want to see them be able to do it on all 4 days of a tournament and not just that one or a couple, a few shots. So I think that's the most interesting thing. So if anybody's watching and they're looking at golf research and they look at my book and they look at other books and they do that and they look around, what's the goal of the study? Is it to get somebody to move the fastest? Is it to get somebody to play the best? So I'm trying to find that Goldilocks area. So,
and what do you think's been the biggest discovery in that journey?
I
From
think
a point of view of something that you can really change a player.
Yeah, so a lot. So yeah, a lot. What I found is I've had the ability to just make people, like, let's say if you came 10 years ago, obviously I didn't have the information I have now, and that'll always change and evolve. But, we can make the adjustments so much quicker, use better tools. But just knowing how much effort that the golfer puts in the different parts of the body and how much gets transferred to the club, and knowing that at the bottom of the swing, what you're really doing at the bottom of the swing is changing directions. So when you see the moves that golfers are making at the bottom, they're not pushing it to speed it up. That's starting to drop off, and it's becoming more about changing directions. So you start to look at, okay, where is the position of this person's body when I need them to start changing directions? Oh, their position's this way. Oh, they're going to put themselves in a different spot. And people always, if you come and take a lesson from me, everybody's like, okay, which way should I force it? They think that's what we're going to do. But in actuality, I spend more time going through the different parts of the body and positioning them where we can force it. So it's a give and take between the body and the club as a system.
Well, and really, the body's got to be imparting the pressure into the hands, hasn't it?
Oh, absolutely.
Because the body's got to be moving to apply that power to it.
I've people ask me this all the time, and it's a great question, and I think about it every day. If I tell somebody to make a change just at the club, some people might adjust their body and do it. But more often than not, I have to adjust their body for them to be able to move the club a different way. So there's like that balancing act. So.
And what you're able to do is you can take a player's swing, you can look at the way in which their body moves, and also you can calculate the amount of pressure and force applied to the golf club.
Well, we could do more than that. What I look at is force transmission through the body.
Okay.
So we're looking at internally what's happening. So when you see somebody, let's say, make a big hip move on the downswing, right? We could see how that force transmission would go up through the body or not, right? And we would see how they transferred out to the club. So I might see a situation where the force transmission starting to go a certain way out the body, and then the right shoulder could be in a position where it leaks energy or force out to the club. And then we're looking at the whole entire story throughout the meridians of the body. So it's really super interesting.
And that obviously force starts in the ground.
Well, we're standing on the ground, so that that's yeah. The best way to. Yeah. So the best, I think the ground reactions things that you see a lot of talk about are a little overrated in the fact that they, those ground reaction force things, obviously it's a big deal. We need them, but it's, you know, all the effects of what's happening at the center of mass aren't just, you can't just stand on a force platform and know what the center of mass of the body is doing. It's estimated. You need the whole body suit and the whole thing to, you know, to really see. But yeah, it's a ground up definitely type thing. But there's areas in the body that generate on their own. That's why we have muscles. So, you know, it's a cool way to put it together, and we're just about done. So I'm finishing up on a new book called Anatomy of the Swing, where it's like the introduction to the whole entire body.
Wow. And I think that's something that...
So back to the... Go ahead, I'm sorry.
Yeah, no, let's go. Yeah, let's go back.
Yeah, so if you go... Just think back to the ground reaction force for a second. If you went and stepped on pavement, right, with a foot, just picture like a foot, could be a robot, whatever, and you hit the ground and you have an expected pushback from the pavement, right? And there's going to be some loss in the shoe or whatever in its rebound. Now, let's say you go to the beach and you step on sand and you start walking on sand. Now the ground starts to, the grains of the sand starts to disperse when you put your foot into the ground, and the reaction back into you is, you know, it gets dispersed because of, you know, where it is in the sand. That's what happens throughout the body. So even though you see a ground reaction force coming up from the ground, it's going to disperse throughout the body, much like that sand. So when you see a ground reaction force vector, right, you're seeing the result. And what we're reporting is what the golfer is doing to create that force.
That's quite unique, really, isn't it?
Yes.
You know what I mean? There's nobody else measuring it in that way.
No.
You know, normally what we're seeing is purely is an upward vector.
Yes.
Which is the equivalent of the magnitude of the force and the direction of it going downward. Correct. If it is that we have if you had a complete kit, then you obviously can measure that against the center of mass. You know, yes. But where you're going is almost looking at actually what it is.
Yes.
You know what I mean? What it is, and that's.
And then the reaction, we know.
Yeah.
Right. So,
yeah.
Dr. Nesbitt has a patent from the 1990s. He built his own force plates. Guy's very smart. He's a good guy to have. He's a good guy to have on your squad.
Well, I bet he is. I mean, you know, that's an amazing thing. So if you get all this force then through the, let's say, into the body, where's the commonality of where it disperses? Because obviously every player is not producing, let's say, a massive speed or accuracy. Right. So are we saying that the high-level athlete retains more of it in the system?
Yeah, I mean, there's things you can also do within the body. I mean, you know, obviously we're buttressing on the ground, and then the body is, you know, there's force transmission through the body, and then joints of the body are creating things on their own with muscles and all that. So you're getting all the effects then of what's happening from above, below, and all the parts. And some of the biggest areas of, you know, the generation of what's happening is obviously in this lower part here where the pelvis is, you know, that junction between where the upper body and the lower body come together. It's obviously a big initial generator. And then how it moves out to the arms. But what most people don't realize are the arms. If you look at all the attachments of the arms and where they attach to the skeleton, you can start to really see how the positioning of, let's say, the main frame of the body, whether it be the torso or the pelvis, affects how you can pull, you know, from your arms as well. So we look at all the attachments sites of where everything is attached together and how they're transmitting force throughout. So it's interesting. Yeah, it's interesting.
And when you say that about the positioning, it makes sense to me that if you position the body in a certain way, you can apply the force to the handle in the right way.
Yes.
You know.
Yeah.
So where is the
100%? That's basically what you're doing as a golf coach, affecting that.
You know what I mean? So if as a coach we position the body better, you know, the result to the, let's say, to the force of the club is that, you know, we're setting it up for an efficient motion.
Yeah.
But where does it become confused and, let's say, wrong then? What do we get wrong in order for the body not to be positioned in a way? Because in essence, when we're hitting the ball, we're quite dynamic and we're moving at speed.
Yeah, so golf
teachers
teachers are good. Golf teachers are good. Everybody, you know, beats on golf teachers and all that. Golf teachers are, you know, we're pretty good. It'll show up a lot in how I'm trying to think of a way to describe it to you, and like how you could see it, just a video and things like that. It'll show up in how the golfer curves their hands at the bottom. So what I mean by that is, if you have a golfer who's out of position, you're going to see a very wide movement at the bottom. So a very wide movement. So anybody who's listening, put a couple dots on the handle on video and watch how it curves into the strike. And if the golfer is, when the body start to notice where that's coming from, is it coming from joints of the body, or is it coming more from spine motion in the body? You just start to look at what parts of the body are producing, and you'll start to see it. You'll start to see it.
And a lot of the initial book that had a lot about the path of the hand, or the hub of the hands, and the path.
Yeah.
And I remember seeing some stuff where it was, is it classed as a quiver, where the shaft was through.
So basically, I just made a second edition of the new book in this quarantine. So what I did is I just put together some new pictures and made it a different size so it fits on the shelf with the other. But yeah, so we talk about the path of the hand. So that book is just a super introduction explaining what alpha, beta, gamma are. And then a quiver, what we call a quiver, that's what it's called in MathWorks, the program we use. It's called the quiver. So it's just showing you one of two things. Well, it's always showing you the direction of whatever you're doing. So if I start pushing the club across my phone screen, the quiver would be just showing you the direction of the push. And then it could also show you the magnitude. So if I wanted to just look at direction, my finger would always stay the same length. But if it was showing me magnitude, my finger would start to grow in the quiver, just showing you the direction of the effort.
Okay. And that was...
Somebody just commented MATLAB. Yes, it is MATLAB. And the name of the company is MathWorks.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
And that was the original book, wasn't it?
Yeah. Yeah.
That was the original book. And there was lots of variations in that path as well, if I remember right.
Everybody. It's as unique as somebody's signature.
And that purely based on our physiology.
Could be. You can interpret it any way you want, but it's different. I mean, if it's the best tool on video to get an idea of what somebody's doing. I mean, if on my downswing there's a widening move at the handle this way, I'm doing what I can to preserve the force this way, which will stop the club from moving out like that. So early on in the downswing, it's that width this way is what preserves the force like that to delay the outward movement. If I forced it like this, my hand path would curve early and then the club would move out. So it's
and that'd be quite let's say a good measure or a measure if we've just got two-dimensional video.
Yeah. I show you how to map it out in the book. I mean, obviously it's intertwined with how you're forcing and torquing it. So it gives you an idea of, if I held this marker like that and then I started to twist my hand this way, you turn my hand this way, you would see that I'm starting to change my force direction and this thing would want to go the other way. But if I kept my hand going this way, you could see I'm preserving this thing. I'm switching ends. So.
And we could see that just on an iPad drawing.
Yeah, I explained to you how to do
already
it.
got.
I show you in the book to put it maybe in. Probably better off, just so you know, I want you to try this next time you teach. Take your iPad and instead of going face on, go like this with the iPad so it's looking down perpendicular to where the stabilized plane, so you can really see it. You'll see it differently. Yeah.
That's quite a different perspective as well, isn't it?
Well, that's the perspective that matters.
Almost parallel to the shaft, almost, isn't it?
Perpendicular.
Yeah, yeah. I got you.
But that's the angle that matters.
Now that's really interesting. Why do you say that?
Because
I actually.
Yeah, well, if you think about it, right? If how can I describe it to you? If this thing's moving like this, let's say, right?
Yeah.
And you're looking at it from that perspective. Yet, if I took this phone and we looked at it perpendicular to it, you would see a totally different thing.
Yeah.
It's not on the. Somebody just asked if it's on the same angle as the tilted spine. No, it would be on the same angle as the club. You would want to be perpendicular to the club in impact. So what I do when I teach is I take my iPad and I just hold it up, so I see a totally different route.
That gives a very different eclipse look, wouldn't it?
Well, it's giving you the right look. You're looking down at the axis of it, so you're getting the right look.
I've got you.
Like if you want to look at how somebody's twisting their upper body, let's say, you'd want to have that thing up here so you can see, because this is a different view. It's more widespread.
So if we
another really cool thing to do with your iPhone or iPad is place it under the person's hands, laying on the mat or the grass. And then you'll be looking up and you'll see the path of the hands from down below. So I do that a lot as well.
That's brilliant. I've never seen anybody do that. Put it.
Oh yeah, I do it all
underneath.
The time, yeah. Underneath. If you go on my group Postmodern, you'll see all kinds of videos. You'll see people go this way through it, that way through it. It's a great view.
I mean, you can't. You know, in some ways, you just can't see that from some angles.
Especially you don't want to see that. You don't, unless you're laying down like this. You're not gonna see it.
You know, that's really quite different. Really quite different.
And I have a student from China, and his dad's very into gizmos, and I don't know if they're going to be coming this year, and gadgets. So they made me a little robot with a camera on it, and I had a remote control, so I would send it in underneath the student in different spots to see and point it all around. So yeah, you got to get creative with where it is. Yeah,
I'm going to try that because nobody's ever suggested to me about putting the camera relative to what we are actually looking at.
Yeah, that's a big deal. Yeah, I covered that in pretty good detail in the book. It's like I dedicated a few pages to that. So,
and that's Then
let me show you real quick here. Go ahead. I'm sorry.
No, let's have a look.
So I don't know if you could see it. That's your typical view.
Yeah.
And then a couple pages later, from the view I'm talking about, and it's a totally different.
Yeah, that's very different look, isn't it?
But that's the view you'd want. Yeah. So whenever you're looking at a part of the body that's interesting to you, like let's say you want to look at a shoulder, you're probably going to want to position your iPad at the shoulder. So I do videoing relative to what I really want to see.
So you're basically isolating the move and then putting the iPad in a position relative to how that's going to move.
Yeah, if I want to see how the shoulder, the right upper arm is moving relative to the right side of the torso, I'll put at a certain part of the swing, I'll align the iPad to where I want to see that relative action. You just can't see it from other ways. So I'm all over the place with the iPad like that.
You'd be like an octopus with iPads and arms everywhere.
Yeah. Yeah. It can get ugly out there. But yeah.
Can if you're
that's
in
why,
the wrong way or in the wrong place.
That's why 3D is nice, because you could zoom in and stuff. But when you're given just like you, I give lessons to people who come for a half hour and they're teeing off in 10 minutes and they want to just hit it straighter, So you got to be creative.
But I mean that at least moving the iPad around and the phone around gives a perspective of the sort of thing you'd see in 3D, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely.
You know what I mean? And then I think the big thing I took out of the book was that the forces that, you know, were talked about: alpha, beta, gamma.
Just names, yeah.
You know, and that being this sort of in plane or about the shaft, you know, or even this on plane, off plane. If I'm
Well, you know that, so that's a different approach. So when you look at, let's say a golfer takes their grip, you would think I had a golf club in my golf shop, but the golfer takes a grip, and they have the club golfer system. The action is always the same, regardless of where in the swing it is. So we are not projecting it to a plane or anything. It's the true moving around action. So if I do this, which is a beta force in our category, force across the shaft, if I do it here or I do it there, it's the same thing. So there's no in and out of plane or anything. It's just purely what you're doing to the club at every instant in time. And that's a difficult thing to do. So what Dr. Nesbitt had to design is, we know what's happening in the room relative to how the club is moving. So now what he has to do is he has to, at each frame, do a mathematical whole matrix to let me know what is happening at every instant in this relationship, golf or club, not to some plane or anything like that.
Because there was a lot of these scientific names and phrases going around at one point.
They still are. They'll always be.
You know what I mean?
You can't get two people to agree on climate change.
That's right.
Yeah.
But there was this massive debate, you know.
It's still going on. Oh, it's still going on. It'll go on forever.
You know, and you're like, well, you know,
you know as well as I do, the currency is ego. Come on.
Yeah, that's probably right. But the thing is, though, Mark, when we're looking at these forces coming from, you know, you've done more work in this than anybody relative to a 3D and these forces, right? What actually, what's the best way to describe each of them forces, alpha, beta, gamma? And how can we, you know, I know this might be a really difficult question. It's how can we see them?
Oh, you could see them. That's what I train. That's what I train my people to do, and my ambassadors and stuff. So here's the way you want to. Here's the way it's done. There's only one way to do it. So we have a known room, let's say, that the club is swinging on. So we need something that's non-accelerating. So we can say a room. We call it an inertial frame, whatever you want to call it, the floor, whatever you want it to be. So we have that frame. And then we look at how the acceleration of the mass center happens. And we're looking at that in relation to a room, up and down, front to back, side to side. Okay. Once we know that, we know how a golfer is working it then, because with an accelerator room. Did I lose you there?
Yeah. I got the room bit, front, back, side to side, and then
then we're looking. What you do is you decipher how the mass center is moving in the room, so you know what the golfer did to that. But that's relative to a room.
Yeah.
So what we need to do to make this practical, because when you look at the room bit, if I go like this at address and I go like this at the top of the backswing, that's in the room, that's the same action, but to the golfer, that's not the same action.
Yeah, I've got you. Yeah.
Okay. So the big argument in golf is what you see everyone else doing is doing it to a room or a plane.
Yeah.
So regardless of the golfer's action, it's relative to something external.
Okay.
So what we're doing is, if I go like this and I go like this at two different points, it's two different actions, different, because they are, because this is, you know, an action to the golfer this way and an action to the golfer that way. So ours is at every instant in time, relative to the golfer club system. The USGA and the National Golf Foundation spent millions of dollars developing this. You know,
I think it's fascinating though. I think it's fascinating how you can and the amount of time it must have taken to understand how to measure something when all we do is stand and swing your golf club.
Not only to measure it, to validate it, to test it in lessons, to publish it, to make sense of it, to still helping the members of my country club to find their clubs in the locker room.
Yeah, because I suppose the reality of this is a lot of let's say players think, you know, I don't need to know that. That's too complex for me. I just want to, you know.
That's fine. That's fine. I mean,
you know, but actually,
if you go to a surgeon, to fix your shoulder, you don't want to know everything they know. You just want them to go. You trust that they know what they're doing, and that's, you know.
And then there's, you know, sometimes the expert is the one, isn't it, who can, you know, like the surgeon, who can just go in and make a little change, but actually influence all that in the right way.
Yeah. Well, it depends on the goal of the person. So I have a long conversation with somebody. What's their goal? I mean, they're just looking to shave a couple of strokes off their game, or they're a mini tour player and they need to do. It depends on the goal of the person. I'm going to give them whatever they want. It's just what their goal is. I need to know what it is, and then I'll start to be honest with them of what they're capable of. So we have different things in my program to figure out their capabilities.
Okay, and how do you do that? How do you figure out someone's capabilities?
That's a long conversation.
Do you bring in that? I mean, obviously you bring in all this experience, don't you? On, you know, what your knowledge of.
We could do it. Yeah, we could do it evidence led, and we could also do it intuition, but we do it mathematically too.
Wow.
Yeah.
That would be a long conversation, wouldn't it? Hey.
Long conversation.
Wow.
I'll have gray hair. When I have gray hair, which is, you know, I gave myself a haircut today. It didn't go well.
Hey.
But yeah, we could have a long conversation about that. But yeah,
that's a staggering.
It is
way to do it. And if you do, and this, but if you were to do, right, I presume when you say mathematically, you go through the individual model that they produce to understand exactly what's happening.
I lost you there. Sorry. I left.
You know, when you're looking at something mathematically and scientifically, you know, are you looking at what's that, or can you almost, let's say, create an equation around what you need them to do?
So we could tackle this from a couple different fronts. So let's do something basic so we can understand. So picture a classroom skeleton standing there, right? And picture a person standing right next to it. And let's say the skeleton of the person was standing perfectly, right? And perfectly how we stand.
Yeah.
So, you know, our posture and all that. So what we're looking at is everything inside the body at all times. So I'll know if, let's say, the center of mass of the chest is more tilted this way and there's a shortness in the body like that. And then I'll be able to see how that changes functionally when they're moving. And then I'll know what that could do to pass and transmit out to the club and to the other segments. So it's like a whole map.
And how many times with that are you, if you have a player, let's say, who has a certain I don't know, individual posture, lean, so you can see,
they all do,
you know, in whatever, you know, are you moving with that, or would you try?
Great question.
Because there's two thoughts there, isn't there? That, you know,
it could be either.
You know,
100%. I could send them to, if they're a body worker or a trainer. Yeah, absolutely. Can we move to better movement? Can we, you know, do we just adjust for it? That's part of the Yeah.
Because there is this,
That's the art of it. Yeah.
I've spoken to quite a few people, and there is this thought with a lot of things that, this is the person, and let's understand what they do, how they do it, and then we can better improve them against, should we just physically change them? Because there's always that gamble, isn't there? If I change someone, if I look at their putt not quite right and think, right, the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to solve the physical side. So I'm going to get the posture right, so now they stand properly, and that'll give them. That doesn't necessarily mean they're going to be a better player.
No, but it could help balance out the internal force transmission through the body. So if they're, most of it's in posture and stuff. So if you have somebody who's, the curves in the spine are, like this, or let's say, for example, the shoulders have moved off the rib cage and more are hanging off the neck, let's say, like this, right? That person's going to have a totally different force transmission than somebody who, but that you can move to better posture and things. So you make them aware of it and you see what they're capable of doing. And it's fun. I mean, that's the whole point of it,
And with that, Matt, what influence can you have on somebody? In terms of, you give me an example of how much change someone could make in terms of this force.
Massive changes. Maybe not in the magnitude of it, but how it moves out.
Okay, and which you'd see in the club head speed and the accuracy of the face.
Yeah, accuracy, club head speed, maybe a couple miles an hour. A much more comfortable move on the person. Maybe the speed stays the same, but it's a much more comfortable, repeatable thing.
Yeah. But I mean, I just think it's fascinating. What's blowing my mind is this idea that you can do it mathematically. And
that's what the mechanical engineer does. Yeah,
you know what I mean. And now, not just the application of force to the golf club, but the way that the force moves through the body and out.
I mean, Dr. Nesbitt says this to me. Great way to communicate it to you. When Mercedes-Benz puts the crash dummy in the car when they're testing it, if they don't know how the force goes through the body, we're dead. So this is not something that's not done in life. It's done in everything. It's what mechanical engineers do.
And it's amazing that we've never done it in golf then. We just, what is it about golf that, means that that's never been done before?
There's
is it never been thought of, or there's no money?
No, there's no money in it. There's no money in it.
Oh,
the money's in military defense and products, and it's not in golf,
But it's great that somebody's doing it, and that information, comes out for the benefit of, golf and players. I just think it's fascinating.
Yeah, and we've had to have made it. It's a private company because and everybody wants us to. Like everybody wants me to have Dr. Nesbitt sit down with some of the other golf researchers and all that, and he doesn't. That's not what he does. He's a designer, and we formed our company. We have a couple of guys who work together, and that's what we're working on this project. And that's the way it is. I mean, it'll be published in certain journals and things for the mathematical part, but it's so unique and so detailed that it's not what other people are doing, and everybody's arguing about it and this and that. I mean, what are you going to do? What are you going to do? I mean, that'll always exist, but it's very, very detailed. That's all I can say.
And do you know what, Mike? At the end of the day, we're all entitled to our opinion, aren't we? You know what I mean? And the reality is, if you measure something in a certain way, and it's mathematically right, why do we need to argue about it? Like you say, it becomes egos then, instead of let's just let the work for what it is.
Turn on the television. You could pick your argument by the channel you watch on TV. I mean, it's like it's the great human pastime. So,
But no, look, it's great to be able to talk to you about it, because at the end of and I must get the second book. I haven't seen the second book. I've only got the first book, because I think with what you tell me about it and what's in it, I think it's great. It's a great way of increasing knowledge and learning based on the facts that are within it, you know, and not just, you know, we're not just saying this is the force that's in the golf club. You actually have a model, you know, and a scientific formula to back up that's what's going on.
It's exactly what's happening. And you know what's amazing, and I can say this from experience, since 2014, since I started using this and teaching, 100% of the time, 100% of the time, when I explain to somebody what they did, they say, that's exactly what it feels like I'm doing. And it should, right? I mean, that's what happened.
Yeah. But look, Mark, it's been great to talk to you. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, man, thanks for having me. My first ever Instagram live.
Oh. You know, it's your debut was perfect. You know, I think I just think it's great to, you know, this time at this moment in time where everyone's sat at home in isolation doing nothing. You know, it's great to be able to talk to, you know, industry leaders like yourself, you know, who are bringing something to the table, and I you know, great to understand more about, you know, what it is and how we do it. So
thanks for doing it.
Thanks, Mike. Appreciate your time. Thank you.
Thanks.